If you took every Premiership team from 2010 to 2019 and made a best 22 of all those teams, you have too much time on your hands. Luckily, I've done it for you. Here is what my ultimate 2010's Premiership team looks like. I hope you enjoy, and let's get into it. So one quick note before we start filling in the side is I know there is only going to be, I think, in my opinion, only one real consistent point of contention, so I thought I'd talk about it now. My wingers are actually wingers. So yes, there are going to be guys on the bench, or maybe not even considered, that you might think are better players all time than the two players I have on the wings. But in my opinion, of all the 2010's Premiership players, they were the two best Premiership wingmen. So that's why they're on my wings. So if you're still going to comment it, I'm not really going to entertain your argument because you know where I stand and that's what we love. So let's start filling in this side, shall we? Full back line, Corey Enright, Alex Rance, Josh Gibson. Now, considering Enright and Gibson both won multiple best and fairest in Premiership years throughout their tenure, yes, throughout this 2010s decade, Enright did only win one Premiership and one best and fairest in that Premiership year. Also did it in 2009. These two are just extraordinary players, but vastly different as well. When Josh Gibson wasn't made to stand next to James Podsiadly or Tom Hawkins, he really was the best third-up defender I have ever seen, and I think we're not going to see one like him in the not-too-distant future, as well as a beautiful kick. He read the ball in the air so well. Yes, he had his limitations as an actual key defender, but that's not what he was used for as the Hawks charged towards 3 premierships, 2 of them being in premiership seasons. So I think he can be a little bit forgiven for that. Boris is one of my favourite footballers and my all-time favourite Geelong player, and not the last on this list, just quietly. But the way he went about his business, his ability in the air and on the ground to do the right thing was exemplary, and I just can't say any more about him. And Alex Rance, I know there are going to be some people that are going to be like, one-on-one, maybe he wasn't as, fantastic, or I know he's a player that's copped a lot of criticism in the past, but in my mind, he's the best fullback here. He was the first fullback I ever saw get tagged. Yes, Josh Jenkins in history did do a really good job on him, but he was a superstar. He just was. That's a full back line that I can bloody get my head around. Half back line. Grant Birchall, Matty Scarlett, Luke Hodge, and Hodge is going to be the captain of this side. Is a Hawthorn bias? He won 30% of the flags in this era as the captain. He's the captain, sorry. But let's start with the Tasmanian himself, Grant Birchall, the Tasmanian Devil, and I think the most underrated Hawk ever. Now, this is coming from a younger fan, so those that grew up in the 70s, 80s, even potentially the 90s might have something to say about that. That's fine, but I can only go off my personal opinion, and I trust my opinion more from my eye test than I do from a highlights package, because you don't see anyone's bad games when you look back and reflect. It's why the idea that I've got to bring in more historical content on this channel is going to involve outside of me, and hopefully something that I can bring to you soon that I know that you are going to love, and I know I am as well. But more about that later. Birch, for mine, he was the perfect rebounding defender. I don't think we've seen a rebounding defender who sums up the term rebounding defender better than Birch does. And in a one-on-one context was vastly underrated in his ability to not lose contests. And in an era where Hawthorn are probably the best kicking team we've ever seen, he was comfortably near the top of that list. That man could kick the ball through the eye of a needle, and boy, he was a pleasure to watch. And in the eyes of all Hawthorn people, much like the bloke on the other half-back flank, he didn't play for Brisbane. Now, Hodgie, what can I say about Hodgie that no one's already said? The number 1 draft pick is already a pretty cursed spot, or it really was by the time he was drafted. Yes, you had guys like Des Headland and Josh Fraser who were making their way in the league at that time. Headland more experienced at that point than Fraser was, and of course we had better number 1s, not than Hodgie, but then the recent past, come through after his era. But considering not only he had to deal with that, but the 2001 Super Draft itself, Ball, Judd, we know these names, Ablett, Johnson, Bartel in that draft as well, and a host of names, Sam Mitchell as well, a host of names that you could talk about. And I wouldn't blame you for thinking that that is the best draft of all time. I think it's the best draft of all time. I don't even think it's that particularly close. Anyone saying 2018? Stop it. But Hodgie, leader, exceptional leader, tough as nails. Yes, not perfect. No one is. But in terms of the people who bled brown and gold, and I still do, he was our perfect. And considering I love key defenders, if you don't already know that, you should know that, but I love key defenders. When I think of the perfect modern key defender, Matthew Scarlett is one of two names that come to mind, and the other one wasn't eligible. He will be if I do a 2000s one, though, so I'll talk about him a little bit later on. Scarlett beat his opponents, was an underrated kick. Should he have won the 07 Norm Smith medal? Who knows? But this is an extraordinary group and an extraordinary backline. Good luck getting anything past that back six in a meaningful way. The centre line, Isaac Smith, Dustin Martin, Steele side bottom. So I understand, like I said before, the Smith and the side bottom thing, people might be like, really? But they're wingers. Isaac Smith, again, is one of those Hawthorn players that I don't see as moving to another club, especially because of the club that he moved to. Come on, Izzy. He didn't have to do us like that. But he did win the Norm, which at the time I hated, but I've grown to love as that grand final has gone past us. Yes, it wasn't against my boys, but it was still a bit of a pill to swallow. But his long kicking, his aerobic ability was extraordinary. And yes, he did miss a couple of crucial goals, one after the siren against the Cats, one on the siren against the Cats. But 2013, that long bomb, just because it happened first doesn't mean it wasn't the most important one. It was a beauty. And Steele, what can we say about Steele that hasn't already been said? Yes, he only won the one grand final in this era, but he's got two now. His ability to stand up, be clutch. And you talk about guys who play outside of their position. This was a small forward who kicked 10 goals in the TAC Cup grand final, who's now one of the premier wingmen of his generation. Extraordinary. And one of the best users off both feet that I've seen. And if Hodgie's going to be the captain for winning 30% of grand finals, Dustin Martin's the starting midfielder, the starting centreman. Now, should he have won in 17? I don't think so. Should have gone to Basher. Why am I whispering? I don't know. But you can't deny that when September came, for a very, very small period there, 4 years, it was Dusty time. Who else could I put in this spot? The man with more Norm Smith medals than anyone else, considering that Hodgie won his first in 2008. So for this decade, doesn't count. Ruck line. Brad Ottens, Joel Selwood, Scott Pendlebury. Do I really need to say anything about Selwood and Pendlebury? Joel Selwood's one of the toughest footballers to ever play. But he ducked. Who gives a shit, really? Come on. We're better than that. And Pendlebury, for mine, is the smoothest footballer I think I've just about ever seen. What an absolute pair of champions they are. The Hawks could have taken Selwood, as we know, the infamous Mitch Thorpe pick, which would he have suited the midfield at the time? Who knows? It was a pretty good bloody midfield back then. Can you imagine adding Selwood to that group? And of course, the Hawks had Josh Kennedy as well. So there was some blokes missing out in that department. Holy moly! But he's just gotten the stand named after him at GMHBA Stadium. Deserves it. Absolutely, he does. His book is really good as well. I enjoyed that immensely. Not that that's got anything to do with why he's on here, but I thought I'd throw that out there. And look, he was maligned because of the ducking, but he was admired across the competition. And an absolute superstar. He really was. And Pendles, the man is ageless at this point. He is 47, going on 68, and he's still a star. It's extraordinary. It really is. Just ball in hand. Whenever he gets... I don't think there is a player who we have never seen, never, not once, never panic. Not once. I think he's the most composed footballer I've seen with ball in hand. Never lightning fast. Extremely durable. His record is crazy. And in my opinion, very worthy of a starting spot. And it was Brad Ottens v. Darren Jolly for mine. You know, Mike Pike, Max Bailey, Ben McAvoy, Toby Nankervis, Nathan Vardy. You know, these guys weren't really... I think I said Toby Nankervis already. Jordan Roughhead, who was out bloody standing in 2016. I'm not going to lie to you. You know, they just didn't live up to Ottens and Darren Jolly. I really like Darren Jolly as a player, but I'm taking Brad Ottens. I thought the pill was an absolute star, round the ground, underrated, did his thing, but oh boy, he did it well and supplied his magnificent midfield with a magnificent supply for a very long career. Half forward line, Ryan O'Keefe, Lance Franklin, Steve Johnson. 2 Norm Smith medal winners. And the best forward I've seen. Now, considering my obsession with footy pretty much started round 1, 2005, ironically, when it comes to Lance Franklin, it involved the 2 Bud teams. Hawthorn played Sydney up at the SCG and got absolutely manhandled. So not a great start to my footballing journey of watching it live. 2005 wasn't a great year to start supporting the Hawks, but geez, it turned around quickly. I'm not saying it's because of me, but I'm not going to say it's not. So I'll, 0.5% credit I'll happily take for the rebuild of the Hawks. Clarko can have the other 99.5. Is he really going to miss the other 0.5? I'm not sure, but I did a tribute to Bud that unfortunately no one has seen, but the love that I've got for Bud, and it probably only grew when he got to Sydney anyway, because when you watch opposition players, you aren't emotionally invested in their down times or down games. He was much easier for me to consume as a superstar, or as Anthony Hudson said, the greatest showman, and he really was, and watching him kick his 1,000th goal, albeit from the comfort of my couch, was extraordinary and one of my favourite non-Hawthorn footballing moments that I've seen. Stevie J, what can you say about Stevie J? He's as quirky off the field as he was on it. He did things I've seen no one else do, and he never looked like he took footy too seriously, but he was a seriously good footballer. He was better than that. He was a great footballer. But mercurial, a bit different. My God, his footy IQ was excellent and a worthy Norm Smith medalist, but again, not in this decade. And Ryan O'Keefe did win a Norm Smith medal, ironically, in a game that never happened. It's extraordinary that the 2012 grand final just wasn't played. I know it was, but I just sort of take it out of my memory bank, throw it over my shoulder. It never actually happened. Sorry, Sydney fans, but shunted, I think, is the word that you could be using there. But I think Ryan O'Keefe might just be my all-time favourite non-Hawk. That big booming left foot. He was the first player that really made me understand what the half-forward flank position was. Vastly underrated, a beautiful kick at goal, and an underrated leader from former teammates that have spoken about him in the past as well. So for all of those magnificent things, he can join in on the half-forward flank as well. But most of all, it's for his footballing ability, which was extraordinary. That's a half-forward line that is definitely frightening. Full forward line, Cyril Rioli, Tom Hawkins, Luke Breust. The forward pockets don't really need to be explained, do they? In a post-Stephen Milne, Eddie Betts era, Luke Breust is just the underrated guy in that group. Cyril was as mercurial as he was becoming. I'm not going to comment on what's happened after Cyril's career. I appreciate what Cyril did for me as a very formative football fan. And I really hope that his relationship with footy and any relationships that need to be repaired can do so. And if they can't, it's not for me to comment on. I have no opinion on it. But my opinion of Cyril is nothing but a flattering one, because the other stuff is none of my damn business. Cyril is the most mercurial player I've ever seen. I've never giggled so hard watching a player play. Cyril's the only player I've ever seen who I think could justify sticking his middle finger up at his opponents because he knew they weren't going to get him. And when you think about mercurial moments or time to announce yourself, if he had a kick to the goal against Melbourne in round 1 of 2008 where he did a blind turn, but unfortunately hit the post, I think if that had gone through, it would have woken up the footballing world as to what he can do. But 5 weeks later against Richmond, that goal from the pocket that Benny McGlynn looked like he wanted to steal on the goal line, but it was so good he couldn't do it. It was simply extraordinary. But I think maybe the point of contention here might be the Tomahawk, because you've got him, you've got Jack Riewoldt, and you've got Josh Kennedy from the Eagles, who I think more than justify their spot here. It was a really hard decision. And what it came down to, not only has Tomahawk kicked more goals, but played more games, but the selflessness gets him the on-field spot here. His goal assists are extraordinary, and he went through a lot. He started his career as a guy that was pretty under a lot of pressure, first of all, for his name. Yes, you could argue Jack Riewoldt was exactly the same because of his cousin, but Tom came in, was a massive whipping boy for some Geelong fans. That 2011 grand final was his kind of coming out party, and he never looked back. An extraordinarily good player and an extraordinarily good side. So for a full forward line and a starting 18, that's what I've got. And the bench, Adam Goodes, Jimmy Bartell, Dane Swan, Jack Riewoldt. Now I'm going to fully explain myself of why Adam Goodes is on the bench. Because every time I tried putting him on field, it never felt like the right position. So I copped out. Straight up, I copped out. What do you want me to do? The man could play everywhere. So, if you've got an idea of where I should put him or who should go to the bench in this side, please let me know. I would love to know. We've got 2 Brownlow medalists, and of course Goodsies as well. A 2-timer, actually. But we've got Jimmy Bartell, who, although he wasn't, I wouldn't call him in my upper echelon of cats, the way he played the game was very, very good. He played some time on the wing later in his career, half-back flank as well. Had one of the most extraordinary beards we've ever seen, but a guy that I respected throughout his entire career and a deliciously skilled player. I genuinely think Dane Swan might be my mum, who is a very big Collingwood supporter, her favourite player of all time. The more tattoos and the more silly things he did, I actually think the more my mum loved him. And I think we all loved him as well. Swanee was kind of the people's footballer at the time, you know, and every time someone wanted to come at him for a personal thing, he'd go out, have 40, kick 2 and stick it up you, because he was a midfielder and a genuine footballer. He was a footballer first and a footballer second, before he was anything else. Love Swanee. And I wanted to put another key forward here because Hawkins, Riewoldt and Kennedy was too hard a decision. Hawkins at full forward felt pretty right, and Riewoldt and Kennedy, neither of them felt that delicious. But I've put Jack in here because I don't think any other footballer in my near 20 years now of watching footy religiously have I seen a player change his arc as much as Jack Riewoldt does. I really didn't like Jack early in his career, you know, the 09, 10, 11, 12, and it wasn't really until 2016 and then the revolution of the Richmond dynasty did you see a new Richmond and a new Jack Riewoldt come to the fray. And that last 6-7 years of his career, he was one of my favourite players in the competition. He still did enough things that made you laugh as an opposition supporter, but he did plenty more to bring the yellow and black a lot of love. And to all the Josh Kennedy fans out there, I am so sorry because that was so difficult. What do you guys think of the team? Comment below, let me know. Make one of your own, make changes to mine. I'm easy, but if you complain about the wingers, I'm going to get very grumpy with you. So don't do that. And also, how are your New Year's resolutions going? Are you a New Year's resolution kind of person? Big Dazzling is trying not to put the big in Big Dazzling anymore. Already down 3 kegs in 2024 and feeling pretty bloody good down here in Gippsland. Look after yourselves, guys. Stay the absolute superstars that I know you are, and hopefully you know you are as well. Share this video with a footy-loving mate. I will see you for the next one, which I think you're really going to enjoy. But until next time, stay wonderful, and I'll see you later.